welcome everybody to Fridays for Future, sponsored by the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition. Just a reminder, we have these events every second and fourth Friday, except for holidays. And today's is titled Empowering Voters and Protecting Democracy, featuring League of Women Voters with Aedin, Clements, and Connie Ferguson, the League of Conservation Voters with Jace Bylenga, and moderated by Cybelle Shattuck. Upcoming ones, October 28th, we'll be looking at doing climate research at 2 biological stations in Michigan with David Caro and I think Steve is going to be on, and a couple people from the Kellogg Biological Station. And then November 11th will be climate-friendly holiday meals and a cooking demo by Ristina Petrovska. We don't want to miss that one. December 9th will be Dan Sitzma from KNAC about adaptive reuse of the First Baptist Church, which I think will be fascinating. So that's what's coming up on Fridays for Future. And then October 23rd, which is just like 9 days from now, it's a Sunday, will be the Earth Day election edition in Bronson Park from 12:30 to 3:30. We want to get a lot of people there. So if you all can reach out to your respective networks, that would be appreciated. There will be a bunch of speakers, and there will be a bunch of activities and a bunch of tables and kids activities, and a wonderful time will be had by all. And if it happens to be raining or snowing, so this is actually October in Michigan, our backup plan is to go to the library. So it's going to happen one way or the other. Hope you all can make it. And again, please reach out to your networks and let people know about it. We'd love to have a big showing, get some news coverage, and above all, register voters and get them inspired for the election. So are there any other announcements from any organization that you'd like to spread the word about? Seeing nothing, I think we should move on then. And so I will pass it over to Dr. Cybelle Shattuck to be the moderator of our session, and take it away.
Good afternoon. So, seeing as how you've all heard about this from KCCC, most of you are probably like me, you call yourself climate voters. And one of the things that can be frustrating is climate change and environmental issues are not always the things that get covered in the public debates or in the newspaper articles or the discussions about the positions that our politicians take. And that's gradually been changing. But until recently, it could often be very frustrating when you were trying to find out what a candidate's position was in relation to environmental sustainability and the climate crisis. And so it is one of the things I've always valued is that there are organizations out there that are trying to gather that information for us and make it available to us so that we can be informed citizens and know how to make the best selection from the options that are available. Also, so that we can get involved in the process of nudging to gather information when we go to public events with our candidates. So today we're fortunate to have representatives from the League of Women Voters and the League of Conservation Voters, 2 nonpartisan organizations that work very hard to include information about environmental activities amongst our candidates and to ask about candidates' perceptions of what's important, how they would approach some of the environmental issues that we're facing. And both organizations do this in the context of really helping to make democracy work properly, to make it possible for voters to really have their rights respected and have their representatives actually represent them. So we're going to have about 10 minutes of presentation by each organization this morning, and then we're going to open the floor to questions so that we can find out more about how these organizations interact with the candidates to learn what they're doing, and how they create metrics in the case of the League of Conservation Voters to evaluate the quality of the work that our representatives do on behalf of the environmental issues that our country faces. I think we're going to start with the League of Women Voters. So we have Connie Ferguson and Aedin Clements, who will be sharing some information about how they gather information. And then we can switch directly. I think it's probably easier to do both presentations and then do questions all together. So afterwards, then Jace Bylenga will talk about the work at the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. So take it away, Connie and Aedin.
Okay, I'll start. And Aedin and I are representing the local League of Women Voters, League of Women Voters of the Kalamazoo area. That's part of the League of Women Voters of the United States. So, and we're going to give you mostly some background on our organization so you understand how we got where we are. And then Aedin's going to talk a little more about some of the more specific things we've been doing locally. And certainly we can cover other things in the Q&A. So the League was founded by the suffragists in 1920 as a, in quotes, mighty political experiment, out of quotes, to help newly enfranchised women exercise their rights they had just received. It was then, and as it is now, a nonpartisan organization. But the restriction of membership to women only was lifted about, well, more than 50 years ago now. So we have men who are members, at least one of whom is at this meeting. So two of whom are at this meeting. We never support or oppose candidates or political parties. That's an absolute. However, after the League's founding, a decision was made to study issues and take positions on some of them. We probably are best known for our work related to elections, but as it often surprises people, we have national, state, and local positions on a whole range of issues, including government, international relations, natural resources, and social policy. So you'll see the League's name pop up here and there on a variety of things, although more often when we're in the lead, it is something related to elections or government function, people's right to know, that sort of thing. We've been active on climate-related issues since at least 2006, using in those earlier years our general natural resources positions and sometimes public access to information, things like that. In January 2019, our national board announced a specific statement on climate change policy. And I'll read it to you, it's just a paragraph or so. The League believes that climate change is a serious threat facing our nation and our planet. The League believes that an interrelated approach to combating climate change, including through energy conservation, air pollution controls, building resilience, and promotion of renewable resources, is necessary to protect public health and defend the overall integrity of the global ecosystem. The League supports climate goals and policies that are consistent with the best available climate science, and that will ensure a stable climate system for future generations, individuals, communities, and governments. Oh, I've got something, a typo in here. Anyway, it must continue to address this issue while considering the ramifications of their decisions at all levels, local, state, regional, national, and global. So the league isn't known for being real concise, I'll have to say, but we also tend to want to cover everything, as you can see from that statement. And that explains really why LWVKA is part of KCCC and why we've been active on climate issues in the broader Kalamazoo community over the past few years. Aedin will tell you more about what we've been doing and how we try to provide information to voters that they can use when evaluating candidates. So Aedin, take it.
Thank you, Connie. Can you all hear me? Thanks. So I'm just going to begin by saying that it's absolutely wonderful that Deb Fryman is serving on the board of the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Deb. And I'm going to start with something that Deb achieved. On June 27th of this year, the League of Women Voters of Kalamazoo area adopted a climate emergency resolution. And I'll just give a couple of excerpts here, and you can read the full text. I've posted it in the chat. It's on our website. I've posted the link in the chat. The LWVKA adopts as a priority advocating for 1, solutions to climate change that would limit global warming to no more than 1.8 degrees Celsius by 2040 to prevent the worst effects of climate change, and 2, rectifying the disproportionately adverse effects of climate change for disadvantaged peoples worldwide, including Indigenous communities, communities of color, migrant communities, the poor, women, youth, the elderly, and persons with disabilities, and 3, expanding social infrastructure to adequately meet the changing needs of the population, including displaced people and migrants. I want to highlight this following commitment because it's something that kind of ties us to being obliged to work, and that we're already doing it to some extent. The resolution commits us to educating our league members and the public about our climate emergency, and also advocating for legislation and administrative actions that will integrate climate risk considerations into decision-making to codify and quickly advance climate mobilization efforts in the Kalamazoo area and in Michigan. The resolution advocates for urgent action by international, federal, state, county, and local governments to reduce net carbon emissions to zero. And as I said, these are the highlights that I've pulled out. Now, admittedly, our action on these items to date has been modest, but we hope that by discussing this here and elsewhere, more league members will become involved in this important work. We've been integrating climate change into the range of issues that we watch locally and where we seek to educate voters. For example, the league has been running candidate forums. This is something we always do running up to the election. We also do a voter guide where candidates are asked to give answers to questions, and this is available in print and online. But in the league's recent candidate forum for county commissioners, though time was short and only 5 questions could be asked, one of those questions that yielded pretty telling responses was as follows. What policies, if any, would you promote to limit the extent of climate change and to protect county residents from its worst effects? And there was a great range of answers to that. And I'm sorry, I found the link to the and reviewed the video on Public Media Network on Monday, but I could not find it today. So I will follow up and make sure that it's available again, because you can view all of those candidates' responses. So the League is generally interested and supportive of local government making improvement in their climate change policies and programs, and is willing to help. So far, assisting with information and education on climate change has been our main activity locally, and we take our membership of the KCCC seriously. We look for ways to develop collaboration with other groups. And I just want to mention one other thing that we've been doing in the League that I think it used to happen long ago, and there's been an effort to revive it, and that's the Observer Corps. And that is League members going identifying themselves as League members and attending meetings. It could be a county commission meeting, it could be a school board meeting, and they simply watch for democracy in action, and there's certain things they watch for. And this has great potential for an issue like climate change. And I don't think we have as many observers as we could do with. So lastly, although this group of people probably all knows, I posted the link to the League of Women Voters Kalamazoo area in the chat. That's the first thing I posted. And if anybody's interested in following up and learning more about the League or even becoming a member, it's there. Thank you. And I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Okay, Jace, your turn.
Okay, thank you so much. Really great. Really happy to be here today with all of you. And I'm going to share my screen. I've got a really short slideshow. Are you all able to see that? Okay, great. So my name's Jace Bylenga. I am a West Michigan regional organizer with Michigan League of Conservation Voters. I prefer he and him pronouns. Feel free to call or text me at that phone number. That's my work cell phone number and my email address. And it's as a regional organizer, it's my job to help you get involved if you have any questions. So don't feel like you're bugging me. Real quick, Michigan League of Conservation Voters is actually a family of organizations, and I thought it'd be helpful to get a little bit of background on us because we're kind of we have lots of different organizations that are a part of our organization. So the Michigan, we have a 501c3, a 501c4, and 2 PACs that help us do our advocacy work really effectively. So our 501c3 Michigan League of Conservation Voters Education Fund works to protect the air, land, and water in communities all across Michigan by engaging, convening, and educating decision makers and voters to fight for an environment that sustains the health and well-being of all of us. So we can do that without asking people to vote a particular way. We can do that to educate elected officials on our issues and what they should be doing. So we can do all of that. I'm going to say same way that a lot of other nonprofit organizations, where when you contribute, you get a tax deduction with a 501c3. So that's the public education work. With our 501c4 Michigan League of Conservation Voters arm, that is a different tax bracket. And with that funding, we're able to advocate for a particular official to be elected to office if they are an environmental champion. So we have a endorsement process where we interview and educate the candidates about our issues. And then if they pass what our board of directors and our other decision makers if they are an environmental champion in our minds, then we'll endorse them and then we'll work to help elect them. Also, once they're elected into office, that's not our job doesn't stop there. We can also work with those elected officials, whether that's in a public education 501c3 way, we can educate them while they're in office, or we can also ask them to vote for particular legislation, such as we worked on Senate Bill 565 this spring, which was a water resource infrastructure bill that was a really big success for us. So try not to get into too much detail if I can help it. Moving on, we have 2 PACs. The campaign finance laws right now are really complicated, and unfortunately they tend to benefit polluters, but we as an organization have a lot of power because we've been able to pull together this really sophisticated organization so we can have an impact. So we've got 2 PACs, one of which we can contribute directly to a candidate and support a candidate directly. And the other one is an independent expenditure arm. So in other words, we can promote candidates and say, vote for this candidate, but we just can't talk to the candidate about what we're doing with that. So that's kind of our big, powerful organization, family of organization that helps us get our work done. Our big pillars of our work are clean water, so for drinking and for the Great Lakes, just for their own intrinsic value, taking action on climate change, and also making sure we have a free and fair democracy, because if we don't have a free and fair democracy where everybody's participating, then the big polluters with the big money are going to win, and we're not going to have clean water or healthy climate. Okay, So how do we do this work? I like this snowflake model of community organizing. I like to, this concept really fits well in my mind. We're all leaders in this community organizing model, and we all have to get to talk to each other in our community. And, you know, because myself as a community organizer, I can only get to know so many people before I just don't have the mental capacity for it anymore. But if I get to know 10 people who then get to know 10 people, and then 10 people and on, then the next thing you know, our whole community is organized and on the same page. So I just like to remind people that we're all leaders, and we need to engage at whatever level we're able to and share that with the people around us. Moving forward, obviously, I think we're all pretty excited about this upcoming election on November 8th. I like to remind people too that there's a lot of unfortunate misinformation out there, a lot of people trying to tamper with our elections. So please, if you see something, say something. This 866-OUR-VOTE is a national hotline number, so feel free to share that with people from outside of the state. When you call the number, they ask you what state you're from, and then they'll triage whatever issue you have. In other words, you know, if it's a really urgent, immediate, important issue, it'll get forwarded on to like the Secretary of State and, you know, authorities who might be able to take action to remedy that. Also, if you email that misinformation at michigan.gov, that'll eventually get to the right people to help prevent any election tampering or other bad actors. Besides that, our Democracy for All program is also helping to encourage people to be poll challengers. So this is a official role that you can sign up for through the state, and you will be able to help monitor the election process at polling locations, satellite offices, and absentee voter counting boards across the state. What you can do with this role is basically you can raise an official objection called a challenge if you don't believe a poll worker is following Michigan's election law. And there are people being recruited and told to break election law right now to tamper with our elections. So this is important. This is really, really important. And I hate that we have to talk about it, but it's important. So shifts are 4.5 to 5 hours. You can sign up for multiple shifts. Sign up to be a poll challenger at this MLCV Poll Challenger 22 link, or you can email questions to contact me. And then if I can't answer the question, I'll get to our Democracy for All program organizer, Brooke. And I'm also going to pop some of those links into the chat when I'm done with this. So don't worry about having to write that down right away. So I'm skipping over a lot of stuff to leave room for questions, but here's a link. This michiganlcv.org/get-involved is a great place to go to learn about volunteering, to learn about, to get on our newsletters, if you want to donate, things like that. Again, there's my contact information if you want to contact me. And let's see if I'm able to check out this chat because I think I can share these links. Okay, so there's the voter hotline number, email, and then sign up to be a poll challenger if you'd like. And please feel free to share that information. One thing I think I forgot to mention at the beginning, Michigan League of Conservation Voters is a part of the National League of Conservation Voters. They tend to handle the federal endorsements for things like senator or congressional representative in Washington, D.C. However, Michigan League of Conservation Voters were one of the largest affiliates of the National League of Conservation Voters. So we even have our own federal affairs team. So we interact with that work a little bit more, but you know, primarily right now we're working on state and local offices. So with that though, I think I covered everything I wanted to. So if people have questions, or maybe I'll just kick it back over to our moderator actually. So thank you.
Thank you, Jace. So Nikki had a question that specifically focuses on, you know, how the members of your organizations are educated about climate change issues. Are there specific resources you use, or, you know, meetings where you focus on this? Can you tell us a little about how your members get up to speed on this issue so that then they can bring it to the people that they're trying to educate?
Connie, would you start maybe by just talking a little bit about the Great Lakes League? Is that relevant to
Okay.
this question?
No, I can talk a little about it. Yeah. Our local league, as well as the League of Women Voters Michigan, are part of the Lake Michigan League of Women Voters, which focuses on a whole lot of anything that has to do with Lake Michigan, really. And they have an annual conference coming up. I think it's a hybrid, as I recall. It's at a time when I can't go, but there is a lot of climate information included there. And in addition, Aedin and I put some answers in the chat to the question from Nikki, but we do have our own local newsletter that we often include information in. There may be calls to action from our state and national organizations that include items about specific legislation that we could take a position on. And from time to time, we have a meeting that might focus on that, although it's been a little while since we've done that. But Aedin, I know you had something else you wanted to talk about too with the book discussion group.
Well, I don't really need to say much except that we do have a book discussion group, and we try to include books. We do include books that are relevant to the various interests of the league, and in that is one context where a good long discussion can be had about a book. It's a small group, but any member is welcome to attend. So that's one way. And then there's another way that I know that this happens nationally, but I found that I didn't have the time to participate. But I know what's happening. There's a very large network within the league nationally working on climate change. So the one group that I watch and that is developing information is a group that is developing ways that the league can help governments, like county governments, in developing climate action plans. Again, unfortunately, I don't know of anybody in our local league who has the commitment to become a fully fledged member of this group, but it would be a great thing. There are some members of that group in Michigan, and we might be able to sort of piggyback off the work that they've done.
And Nikki also asked about angles other than water. And we really have the broad range of interests. We're interested in habitat changes. We're interested in effects on communities one way or another, and the inequities that are part of that. And it's not limited to water and where there may be too much or too little of it.
Yeah. When Mary Brown was a member of the Natural Resources Group, she was very anxious about the tree canopy in the county. And one thing that I participated in was a meeting with Portage City. And it was a very, very good back and forth where I felt as if they were educating us about what they did, but they were very, very interested in what we were interested in the league's concern. And I felt that the meeting, although it was only one meeting, was very, very beneficial.
But we know there's always more to do. It's frustrating because one thing about the League of Women Voters is just because of the broad range of our concerns, that can be a strength in that we tend to see interrelationships, but it also can be a frustration because every issue is a very high priority for someone in our organization. So it gets, as they say, complicated.
Where could I jump in? I feel like we're talking about kind of how we educate our members about climate, I think was one of the questions. And my organization, we work not only with decision makers on educating them on what the best policies might be. For example, when Governor Whitmer's administration started its first year, we were ready with a roadmap for the governor and her team for the My Healthy Climate Plan, the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. And moving forward for the next administration, hopefully Governor Whitmer will be reelected, and we're going to give them and the state legislature a plan for how to, suggestions for how to manage climate action and to the best way for climate justice. And so that's how we're going to educate decision makers. To educate the general public, we have a lot of different ways we do that. We have weekly newsletters. We engage people with public comments. For example, the Line 5 proposed tunnel has a comment period that is ending today. So if you haven't submitted your public comment yet for that, it's due today, and I'll send a link over to the Michigan Climate Action Network has a nice set of information there. But also we're working on, we have a storyteller manager in our communications department. So our communications team is really amazing, and we work on telling people stories who are activists in the community. And we're actually working on putting together a project on telling the story of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition and how the formation of the Climate Crisis Coalition was really, we came together because the community showed up in force for an event, and about 1,500 people showed up for a climate action event in Kalamazoo in 2019, and that now is turned into our these presentations on Fridays, but also we're working with the city and county in Kalamazoo on a sustainability coordinator position, and so we're wanting to tell those stories and how the individual can have an impact, not only just here's the science, here's the facts, but here's how your voice can make a difference.
Jace, could you also talk a little about the assessment mechanism whereby the League of Conservation Voters actually keeps the scorecard on legislators, and what are the criteria for trying to evaluate the people who are in office and how well they're actually working to protect the environment?
That's a great question, and I'm going to do my best to answer that. I'm a little newer to the organization as an organizer. I started in May, so I haven't been super involved with our endorsement process. However, the endorsement process will meet with the candidate and the candidates for a particular office, and we'll talk to them about the issues that we care about. And those issues have been evaluated with our board of directors and our government affairs team.
Democracy and climate change.
Yeah, related to democracy and climate change, definitely. So if those elected officials, they sit down with us and we tell them about our issues and then ask them questions, they have to respond in writing, and then we have a conversation with our board of directors and other volunteer and staff leaders on if they make the grade, so to speak. And I noticed one of my other colleagues jumped on. If she's listening, maybe she can add anything I might have missed, but if not, no worries. And
hey, Jace. Hi, everyone. No, Jace, you summed it up beautifully. We meet with candidates, we talk about our issues, we hear a little bit about their campaign and how that's going. And then from there, like you said, board of directors meet, staff leads meet, and then we kind of go from there.
And Natalie, I believe there's a distinction between the scorecard and the endorsements, right? So the scorecard is actually trying to evaluate what people in office have been doing when there is a bill in office to actually do something related to the environment, and it keeps track of how they voted on various issues over the years, and then kind of accumulates an annual score for people, which will apply to both Republicans and Democrats. So it's completely nonpartisan.
Correct. Yep. So our scorecard for folks that are currently in office, and if they have a lifetime score with us, so that's like multiple terms over a legislative session, you can sometimes see that on our website. There's also folks like just the regular legislative.
Maybe more than two parties, though.
Well, she said they've got Democrats and Republicans.
Carolyn, could you mute yourself, please?
That's bipartisan, not non-partisan.
Carolyn, could you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
So yes, the scorecard that goes for folks that are currently in office, and the endorsement questionnaire is sent out to Democrats, Republicans, really anybody that is running for office that would be interested in an endorsement of Michigan LCV. So that could be incumbents, new time candidates as well. So a little distinction between the two.
Okay. So I'm really curious, given that the League of Women Voters, Aedin was mentioning the recent forum for county commissioners, and that some people were better prepared to answer questions about environmental issues than others. For both organizations, since you do meet with candidates and attend public events and pose these questions, have you been seeing a shift in candidates' awareness, in whether they actually have concrete ideas about what to do in response to climate change? Are there any patterns you're seeing? Are there things we could be hopeful about?
For me, I guess the short answer is yes. And then who else would like to comment?
I would just comment that a common refrain now is the 100-year storm that now comes every 20 years or whatever, like there's an acknowledgement that this is already upon us. And I haven't heard anybody denying it. What I have heard is, no, we should not be putting any public money into anything. That's one thing I've heard, but nobody is saying that it's not happening. And that, I think that's, new.
Yeah, the distinction I've noticed is that the deniers who used to say nothing is changing, everything's the same, everything's fine, are now starting to say, well, obviously the climate is changing, it always changes, it's not our fault though, and we can't do anything about it. So the environmental champions out there are obviously in all agreement that human caused climate change is the problem and that we need to mitigate our impact on it.
So I think that's maybe important for people who want to engage with legislators or candidates at candidate forums, or when they're talking to their reps or writing letters or emails, or and it may mean the strategic way to approach people is not so much to say, do you believe it's anthropogenic, but to say, okay, we all know things are changing. What are your strategies for helping us to adapt or reduce the risks or deal with social justice, resilience, capacity differences in our communities? So that might be helpful. If everyone's okay that yes, climate's changing, then maybe the kinds of questions we ask can change as well, and focus more on actions we'd like to see. Do people have other questions? I know, Susan, you were asking about the size of the local groups, and I think I'd like to rephrase part of your question a little and ask, how do your groups overlap with other activities? Are your members involved with other climate-related organizations in town or activities in town?
Well, I can start a little bit. The League of Women Voters has, I don't know, Aedin, about 225 or 240 members, somewhere in there, I believe.
Deb posted the number. Thank you, Deb.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
266 members.
Okay. And then, well, obviously we're members, as an organization, we're members of KCCC. Our individual members are all over the place. You see us well, I know there are people who are involved with the LCV and with Sierra Club and with various environmental concerns groups around the area. I think, Aedin, you can probably add more. And that's just locally. Nationally and statewide, we're part of many coalitions. We often work with coalitions.
Same with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. It seems like with our reach, we're pretty much at the table anywhere climate change is being discussed. In Michigan, for example, somebody in, excuse me, sorry, I read a question real quick. Like the city of Ann Arbor is doing some really progressive things, and we're very involved with that. I think it's a millage. And I'm also attending Grand Rapids Climate Coalition meetings myself, besides being the interim board president for the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition. So Michigan League of Conservation Voters is very active, not only at the state level, but also nationally. We're working to advocate for, as strong of policies for climate action like the Inflation Reduction Act, and that used to be called Build Back Better before that.
Yeah, I think Tim has a question.
Yes, for the League of Women Voters. I may be wrong, but I've heard, I've not attended any of your forums, unfortunately, but you had limited, I've heard you've had limited candidate participation.
Yes.
Is that true? And if so, how would you explain it?
I can give it a try. This is not new. We, by our rules, have to have at least 2 candidates from different parties present in order to hold a forum, which if there are only the 2, what we call major parties running in the race, can be a problem because one of them often chooses not to be there. And our attitude is we mentioned that they were invited and so forth. When there is a third-party candidate running, we are then able to hold the forum, and we do. But it is certainly regrettable and not a service to the voters, in our view, for people to sit out those forums.
So those non-participants, do they ever explain why they don't participate?
Often not, and some of them will occasionally participate in the online voter guide, but often it's the same people who are not there. I think it's quite political. Even though we are very nonpartisan in how we do things, if you look at where our positions align, they are much more often aligned with one of the major parties than with the other. We don't look at what party's supporting it before we take the position, but it happens that that's the case. And I think there is a feeling about that.
Steve, would you like to ask a question?
I think Tom was in the queue before I was.
Okay, Tom first.
Okay, this is related question for the League of Women Voters. I've been frustrated by looking at the voter guide because candidates are very adept at sidestepping, dodging, answering completely different questions when they respond. I noticed, for instance, that one of the gubernatorial candidates, in responding to climate change and the environment, basically wanted to talk about business and giving them less restrictions in their operations. So, I guess that it's mostly a comment, but a question. Have you devised ways to make your questions more more targeted so that they have to respond to the question rather than to whatever they feel like talking about?
Good question, Tom. Maybe I'll just jump in real quick. I think, sticking to emotions and to actual impacts on actual people, like I can show up to a public hearing and say, did you know it's about 42% of children who grow up in homes with natural gas furnaces have asthma symptoms. Like I can say a statistic to an elected official, ask them a question about it, and then they can just start to talk about business and this money and this and that. It doesn't matter. But if I show up and I say, hey, my 3-year-old has asthma and I read this study and he's sick and I'm really upset about it, and show your actual emotion about your sick child, if they start to then change the subject, I don't think anybody's going to vote for them anymore. You know what I mean?
Crafting questions, as anybody who's tried it knows, is very interesting. We work very hard to avoid leading questions. They need to be neutral. We try to avoid things where people can say just yes or no. And I don't know how to make somebody answer the question you actually ask, but it's sometimes a little easier in a forum situation because you can do a follow-up, but when it's a voter guide, we print what they say, and that in itself can be informative to a discerning reader. Not all our readers are able to figure that out, but it's hard.
Yes, I discerned if a person doesn't know how to spell PFAS, that's a message.
There you
Yeah.
go.
The other
Um,
thing,
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead, Aedin.
The other thing is that the league doesn't edit the responses, except this year there was a response from somebody that had to be edited for, I think, libel and racist comments. And that was the first time that the people who do our local voter guide came across that. It was at Michigan State level race that this needed to be done. And that's the first time I've heard of that. So.
Just to follow up a little bit, I wonder if you've had taken the effort to look at the candidates' websites and see what they're saying in a forum that they control rather than the forum that you control.
Sometimes, but not in an organized way. And of course, that can't affect what we publish because we have to publish what their response is. That's somebody else's role to talk about it and point it out. But I see Deb has some addition.
I noticed on the most recent candidate forum that a lot of the people were just speaking off the cuff with no written response. And in those sort of situations, the value is to see someone speaking off the cuff in a not prepared way. You may often hear a different message than what their candidate team has come up with to put on their website.
Yeah.
One more addition to this thought, you know, our organizations, I think, are also doing things systemically to help make these questions harder to not answer. So by hosting the October 23rd event, that's all about climate change being a voting issue, we're making it not as acceptable to skirt those, to avoid answering those questions.
Steve, would you like to ask your question now?
Sure. Thank you, Cybelle. Actually, it's maybe kind of a series of rambling comments and a few questions, but and I apologize for being late if you've already covered this, but you know, as Jace just mentioned, we're encouraging people through KCCC, through LCV, through CCL, through the working group for Hope for Creation, for people to be climate voters. And you know, the question, of course, arises: how does one do that, and where do you get your information? And I'm extremely grateful to the League of Women Voters for their voters guide and for these fora where, you know, we try to get people to state their position so that we can be climate voters, whether it's Democrat or Republican is you know, not as important as their position on climate, I think, in the true sense. But I guess so. One question is how, you know, like if a candidate makes a statement at a forum, is that now considered public domain? And can that statement be spread far and wide? And for nonprofits, so in particular for, you know, I'm involved with Hope for Creation, where, you know, a coalition of houses of worship, nonprofits that are, you know, are forbidden from endorsing specific candidates. Is it kosher to state or make it clear what these positions are of individual candidates? I mean, by implication, we are endorsing a candidate that makes a position on climate, but not necessarily endorsing a candidate, but, you know, put the pieces together and it's sort of an endorsement. So I'm kind of curious where the lines are with regard to dissemination of that kind of information.
Shall I answer that one or try to?
Give it a try. Give it a try. Thanks.
Okay. The candidate forums are public events and often covered by the press. More so in the past than lately, I'll have to say. But the problem is we record the forums and other people record them as well off Zoom. But the issue is we do ask candidates to sign a form that says they will not use any of the material recorded from the forum in their campaign materials. There has been a problem recently with an opposing candidate lifting a clip. And so now we are adding to our, I guess, to the recording itself, a statement that says this may not be used in any candidate campaign material, I guess. Because things are said sometimes that are simply not true. Fancy that, but I don't know, any of the other people. Deb, do you want to add something to that?
Yes, the league announced 3 times during the last forum that no part of that forum could be used, that it could be rebroadcast in its entirety. Right. So you get the context of things, and that that is the rule unless people get express permission from the League of Women Voters. And that would be a hard thing to get if you were a candidate to take a piece of it.
But if I have, you know, I attend the forum and I make a transcript of responses, written transcript, it's not a video, it's not someone's voice, it's a written transcript of someone's response at a forum. Can I post that? Can I spread it among, you know, an organization and say, here are responses to a question on climate change. You decide which ones are which ones are supportable if you want to be a climate voter. And, you know, if the answer is in absolutely not, then my follow-on question is, how do we help people be climate voters? Are we, you know, are they on their own to go do their own research on candidate websites and, you know, try to corral them individually at an event, or, you know, what can we do? Yeah, I'm going to shut up.
From the Michigan League of Conservation Voters standpoint, I'm not sure if we have any rules like the League of Women Voters does about similarly, but we just had a climate forum for candidates running for State House and State Senate in the Kent County area, overlapping with Kent County. And, you know, it was at a university at Aquinas College, and we had a news outlet show up, and, you know, they were filming, and it feels like anything said or in that room is essentially public domain. For me.
Yeah, I just off the top of my head, and Deb, again, you've been more involved with this recently than I have. I would say that if you make notes and you report what it said, it's as if it's more analogous to a reporter there writing a story. And that it probably would be acceptable as long as you do it responsibly. But I don't know, I don't think we can control that, can we, Deb?
I'm not sure of the legality of that. I know they were talking about the video being
Yeah,
rebroadcast.
more concern about the video, and it tends to get used in, but certainly if you're talking to friends and people in an organization that you're part of, I would think that makes some sense to be able to do that. But I can't say for sure what the current policy is because I haven't been directly involved. And it tends to evolve to meet the situations. And I see we are being told to end up the meeting.
Yeah, we've reached the end of the hour, so we need to wind up the conversation. But I think we got a really good feel for the resources that both organizations are making available. And, you know, Steve's final question was really handy in terms of how other groups can maybe use some of those resources to even create some outreach and education in their own communities. And clearly the best way would be to send them to watch the recording of some of these forums if they were not able to attend on their own.
Yes.
So let me just close this out by thanking Cybelle, Connie, Aedin, and Jace for the information that you've brought to us. I think it's raised a lot of good questions, and I think the conversation could go on, but we don't have time for it today.